My name is Randy Schanze. I am an amateur science fiction author, and welcome to the second of these videos of me reading my stories. The story I'm going to be reading today is called It's Not Rocket Science, and it is the title story, title track, if you will, from my book, It's Not Rocket Science. This is actually the fourth of 5 books that I've written and self-published. If you want to find a copy of it, you can find it on Amazon under the name Kevin Long, which was my pseudonym for a while, but I've basically decided to ignore that and reclaim my birthright as Lord of the Geeks. Anyway, so I'm going to read that story for you today. But I'm going to be using my Kindle. Some people ask why I use my Kindle to read instead of reading the book, and it's because, well, look at these glasses. I mean, major eye strain city. If you were to put these two lenses together and look through them, you could see Saturn's rings. My eyes are that bad. All right. Anyway, it's not rocket. Oh, yeah. Last week I read a horribly depressing story. This week I'm going to try and read something a little lighter. It's not rocket science. It was a time of magic, a time of wonder, a time of wizards, and the mighty mages of old, men like Fatumsh, the cheerful wandering fornicator, and Blafgar the flatulent, and Heinlino, the creepy swinger. Not less pronounced, if somewhat more pronounceable, were women wizards, such as Katie the trollop, Sheena the slattern, Hepzibah the other trollop, and Wanda with the stupid husband of convenience. Such marvels as these held sway in this distant age when empires rose and fell, based entirely upon their whim. The fate of kings could be upset by the mere timely raising of a magical eyebrow. A particularly grumpy sorcerer, Rumple Bumple Dumple Stinkled Akjas Do, after a particularly disquieting bowel movement, sank Atlantis. And among these luminaries, these light bearers, these glowing paragons of mystical hoo-ha, was Steve the Cheese Guy. Steve really was a wizard, honest to gosh, but his powers were mostly limited to card tricks and juggling and the ability to make milk curdle slightly faster than it otherwise would have. As lame as this was, it still put him head and shoulders and upper torso above the rest of poser wannabe wizards out there. Granted, nobody would play cards with him anymore, and granted that the juggling thing was really more of a nervous habit that tended to freak people out, but he was still at least able to eke out a living as a junior assistant to a local dairy farmer. Now, Steve had a dream. It was the same dream that all wizards had, to get chicks, even female wizards they all swung that way. It was nature's way of keeping the magical population down to acceptable levels. They were still impossibly hot, mind you, but it was strictly a look-don't-touch kind of thing. Alas, the ones a minor league milk curdler could get were ones that had already been passed over and were cast aside by Major League Baseball players, furries, hippies, hippie furries, and the esteemed brotherhood of loyal chubby chasers Local 107. So that was a fairly unobtainable dream, and Steve knew it. Granted, there are always the neo-pagan chicks, but come on, man, nobody was that desperate. So Steve had another dream. He wanted to be the first wizard in space, space having only been recently discovered. "Ah, Mrs. Enfant Catalanazon," Steve said, upon seeing his coworker's wife in the park one day. "Nice to see you. What lovely triplets you have there. Say, do you think your sister would want to go out with me?" "I doubt it. Ocularis the Occidental was able to clear up her pink eye." Oh. This conversation wasn't going well at all. He felt uneasy. Without realizing it, he began to sidle towards the kids in their stroller. "Still got your crazy dreams of being the first wizard in space?" she asked. "Yep, I'm on my way to the Library of Highly Suspect Sciences right now. In fact, to bone up on my universal gravitation." He smiled in a way that he hoped was smug. Science was an up-and-coming thing, very cutting-edge and slightly naughty in a rakish kind of way. "I don't hold all that newfangled science crap," she said. Flap sweat was forming on his forehead. Steve grabbed the 3 babies and started juggling them. "Ah! Put them down, put them down!" He did, and she stormed off. "Ah! Dang it," he said to no one in particular. The library was overseen by Oingo Boingo, the previously four-eyed. He'd had it in for Steve ever since the accident last fall, in which Steve had been juggling meat cleavers while hitting on a pretty sushi chef, sneezed, and accidentally chopped off the librarian's main head, leaving him with only his auxiliary head. "Oh, God, it's not you again," Oingo Boingo said. "Hey, how's tricks? I've told you 1,000 times, Steve. I'm not a prostitute." Okay, sorry. "Say, the nub is at least I'm not one anymore," the librarian said. "Not since I paid off my student loans." After an awkward pause, Steve continued. "The nub is looking good today. Head growing back okay, I see. Probably we should change your title to the once and future four-eyed." Oingo Boingo seethed. "If you must know, Salic, the insurance accepting, informs me that my nub has split and now I've got 2 heads growing in." The 6-eyed? "I'll have to have one of them removed and I've still got another 5,000 drachmas left on my deductible. Your little stunt has just devastated me financially. I swear I'm going to get Elric the litigious on your ass. Look, how many times can I say I'm sorry? Do you have the book on combustion wanted? It's right here. But you're fooling yourself with these crazy conspiracy theories about the sky being nothing but air colored by light refraction from the sun. Well then, what is the sky? Steve asked. It's rock, painted by the gods blue. We live in an enormous cave. The sun moves on a track hanging from the ceiling. Well then, what's beyond the rock? Steve asked. Nothing, just more rock. It's rock as far as you can go in any direction. Steve took the book and went home. Riding the magic bus home, powered by an extremely irritating choir singing hymns to Transito, the goddess of inertia, he discovered that Oingo Boingo had inserted a number of extremely obscene pictures among the pages, really rude phrases scrawled across them. He'd been smiling at a bunch of pretty milkmaids all in a row on the seat facing him, and the bus jostled, and a picture of two goats attempting to make a baby goat slipped out. A picture of his face had been pasted on one of the animals, and the phrase Steve Ballbanger had been captioned in singing paint, which was not only glowing and perfectly legible, but also belted out the offending phrase in an impressive contralto. Magic. It can make the world a paradise, but mostly it just ends up being used to make your enemies look like a-holes in public. Anyway, the milkmaid screamed, and without realizing he was doing it, Steve snatched the hat, glasses, and hearing aid from an elderly scrimshaw enthusiast sitting to his left and started juggling them. He got thrown off the bus and had to hoof it home. He was so upset that he juggled the library book and his lunchbox and a very traumatized turtle all the way. His house was a fairly typical thatched roof Edwardian affair built partially into the hillside, with entirely pointless curved walls and hallways. Nothing remarkable about it, but you could still see it a long way off because of the 300-foot-tall rocket standing in the backyard. The neighbors complained. They said it was an eyesore, also tended to act as a lightning rod in summer storms, which spooked the cattle, pigs, and some of the more portly and indolent neighborhood children. He was greeted by a neighbor as he walked home. Steve wasn't in the mood to talk, but Peter Pusillanimous and Larry Loquacious intercepted him on the way. They were no good nicks. Member of the local Toastmasters, always buttonholing passers-by and extorting them for money with threats of unbridled effusiveness. If they didn't cough up the cash, he tried to ignore them. Heading home, are you? Larry said. Steve clenched his jaw and kept walking. Sure is a nice day for it, Peter said. Can't talk, Steve said. Been to the library, have you? No. Go away, Steve said. In one deft move, Larry snatched the book out of the air and replaced it with a large fish that he'd been carrying for no particular reason, apart from thinking that it might come in handy at some point later in the day. Around noon, the thing had begun to stink, not because it was dead or rotting or anything. It was just a member of a now extinct species, Pisces olearii, or stinkfish, which attempted to evade predators by acting like a skunk. He'd been trying desperately to get rid of it. Grah! Said Steve, who was now juggling his lunchbox, the turtle, and the malodorous seafood. Sure you have, said Larry. I recognize Oingo Boingo's brushstrokes in these dirty pictures here. This one's a good likeness. It really captures your fondness for pasta. That is pasta, right? Steve tried to snatch the book away from him, but Larry tossed it to Peter, who thumbed through it. Say, this is more like it, said Peter. Mystic runes and stuff. Much better than that science stuff you're always yammering about. Ain't runes, said Steve. It's math. Math? What's math? It's a system of representing the universe through numbers. Oh, numerology. Yes. Wait. No. This is completely different. It's an attempt to quantify natural laws in a precise manner and extrapolate how we can best use them to our advantage, Steve said. Well, that's how magic works, chum, said Peter. Screw magic. I've had enough of magic. It's not worth anything anyway. I mean, I got magical powers. Well, one anyway. And it's a whole bunch of nothing. Who's to say anybody's powers are worth more than mine? I mean, when was the last time anyone saw Rictus the Rigid or Grand Elf the Grandpa actually do some really big prestidigitations? Who's to say that it's not all just smoke and mirrors? Who's to say they're not just exaggerating it? Hey man, Larry said affably, you better watch out or Jupiter will bust your ass for saying stuff like that. Jupiter's got more important things to do than worry about my trash talk. He probably really doesn't, observed Peter. He's a god after all. They're seldom at capacity job-wise. Yeah, check it, Larry said, and then he prayed. La silo estas flamanta cun singenoraj gamboj il estas piedebanta. Rilag la mantian nebulaton. As if on cue, and this really was a cue of sorts, the skies opened up and a shoe flew out and hit Steve on the head and caused him to strew his crap that he was juggling all over the place. The reptile scampered away, it being a member of the now extinct species of Damnat Tucedo illuminum, or damn fast turtle. Steve snatched his book from the Toastmasters, grabbed his lunchbox off the ground, and then picked up the thing that had hit him in the head. A shoe? He asked quizzically. Peter shrugged. There's an energy crisis on the mountain of the gods. It probably would have been wasteful to squander a Latin bolt on you. No sooner was he in his poorly designed round front door with the knob right in the middle. Seriously, what kind of sense does that make? And he found himself face to face with yet another unwelcome presence. Esmeralda, the almost preternaturally beautiful, was her name, but Steve assumed that this was intended as irony. She had once again stripped naked and was scampering around the place wearing only one of his dress shirts. Unfortunately, as she weighed in excess of 400 pounds and Steve weighed in at a mere 135 when soaking wet, it never really had the effect that she was going for. Just the opposite, really. She kept trying, though, despite the restraining order. If I give you a shoe, will you go the hell away? He asked. She said yes, but then decided to hold out for the other shoe and refused to leave. He brought her out on the porch and prayed to Jupiter in hopes that she'd get beamed as well, but no luck. So he magically transformed some milk into cheese, then made a grilled cheese sandwich for himself and one for her. She was his stalker, but he discovered that if he fed her and let her stare at him with creepy adoration, she was at least quiet. Whereas if he tried to keep her out of the house, she made his life a living Gehenna. This was actually exactly how his dad and his brother and his sister had met their wives. His sister was also mildly magical. But Steve refused to settle. So how does this candle thing work? She asked. Rocket. Whatever, Steve sighed. The idea is that I burn some highly combustible stuff which converts to a rapidly expanding gas. I think I'm a little fuzzy on some of the details. And the expansion of the gas, or whatever, forces my rocket into the sky. So, lots of people can fly. Fly-O, the human fly, flies all the time. So does Plio, the inhuman fly. She's renowned for her flexibility, you know. I don't swing that way. I'm not magical or anything. But in her case, boy, I'd be willing to try it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm committed to stalking you and all, but Plio? Damn. Steve blinked at her for a moment, then soundlessly turned back to his book. I'm not going to just fly, he said. I'm going to go beyond the sky and into space. But the sky is the roof of the world. The gods walk around on top of that. Our sky is their floor. Oh, you don't think it's just rock forever and ever? No, that's just stupid. Right. Anyway, so according to my years of research, I've concluded that our world is not a giant cave, but rather a sphere of about 6,300 kilometers in diameter and about 40,000 kilometers in circumference. What's that in miles? She asked. I don't know. A bunch, I guess. I do stuff exclusively in metric because it sounds all sciencey. So we're on the top of this ball? No, actually we're relatively near the equator. That's crazy. We'd fall off no matter how sticky your shoes were. Gravity is stickier than any shoe, Steve said. Then he decided that was a pretty good fortune cookie sentiment and scribbled it down for future reference. Pleased with himself, he continued, it holds us down, but since I know that VE is equal to the square root of 2gm divided by r, I know that I only have to be going 11 kilometers a second to reach escape velocity. And then, if I can do that long enough, I'll be in space. 11 kilometers a second, she said, or 12. I'm fuzzy about the details, he admitted. But once you hit the roof of the cave, for the 50,000th time, there is no freaking roof to the cave. It's just, the sky is just gas. It gets thinner and thinner as you go higher and higher until you're past it all, and then you're in space. And then you'll meet the gods? He groaned. There are no freaking gods, he said. There's only phenomena which we don't understand yet. Like the shoe. Yes, like the shoe. Which fell from the sky. Why again? I don't know. Meteorological phenomena. A shoe storm? I don't know, he shrieked. Maybe there was a tornado that hit a shoe store and it got dropped here. The point is that there's got to be some perfectly logical explanation behind it. And the bus powered by singing? Well, the choir were all strapped in the rear bumper, so I'm assuming some kind of jet propulsion. And your own ability to curdle milk? Ah, that's a good one, he said. I admit that one had me stumped for a long time, but nowadays I'm pretty sure it's radiation. I grew up next to a radium mine, you know. Fine, so what's beyond space? She asked. Excuse me. Nothing. It's just space as far as you go in any direction. And that's different from there just being rock in every direction. How? He blinked at her. Because one is rock and the other is void. Well, not exactly void. There's molecules and shit. You wouldn't understand. Probably not, she agreed. Can I have another sandwich? I don't get this chesty by dieting, you know. Yeah, fine, I'll make you one. Also, I was thinking of stealing some of your underwear later. Yeah, laundry's down the hall and on the left. After she was gone, he called all of his friends. And yeah, I know what you're thinking, but despite the somewhat hapless portrait I painted here, he had a fairly large circle of people who at least pretended to like him. And he announced that he was going to ascend to the heavens on tongues of flame, thereby proving the triumph of science over magic. But why if he failed? Asked Blanco the wacky. There is no failure in science. Every negative outcome eliminates one false avenue of investigation that brings us one step closer to the truth. It is the way to... Yeah, stop being so chatty and officious, said Peter Pusillanimous, and just freaking get on with it already. Fine, said Steve. He started to say something else, then thought the better of it, and went to the gantry, up the gantry into the capsule. Absently, he noticed that he wasn't juggling. Hey, I'm not nervous, he said to no one in particular. I'm not nervous at all. I was made for this. No, wait, that implies a maker. I know. I was born for... No, that implies predestination. He suddenly realized that he'd started juggling 3 lug nuts while he'd been debating this, and threw them down in disgust and climbed into the rocket. He hit the button, and the thing launched off the ground, slamming his spine into the tastefully embroidered eider-down cushions he'd installed just for this very purpose. They were much nicer than the goose feather ones he'd looked at. Those tend to poke you. The speedometer crawled up and up, 5 kilometers per second, 6, 7, and the altimeter climbed like crazy too. At 2 minutes into the flight, the first stage fell away, and he was now 8 miles above the ground, though that number had no significance to him, as he could only read metric. He was weightless for just an instant, and then the second stage engines kicked in, slamming him back into his cushions. He mentally ran through the numbers. At about 186 kilometers, 116 miles, about 6 minutes from now, the second stage would be burned out, and then he'd be in orbit. At that point, he'd decide what he wanted to do next, and then he'd light the third stage. The speedometer and the altimeter climbed up and up and up and up, and then BAM! At 115 miles altitude, he hit the roof of the cave at 25,000 miles per hour and died instantly. Down on the ground, the crowd saw the flash and then gazed awestruck at the prominent brown and black smoldering gash that had been cut into the sky. So, I guess that eliminates one dead end, huh? Said Steve's sister. I guess so, said Esmeralda, shocked and sobbing. You want to go make out? Steve's sister said, seeing her chance to take advantage. And how? Said the stalker. And the moral of the story, gentle readers, is this. Just because somebody's surrounded by idiots doesn't mean that they're not an idiot themselves, or something like that. I don't know. It's just a simple fantasy story. It's not rocket science. Once again, thank you for your kind attention, and tell your friends if you like the story. Please feel free to subscribe. You might also want to check out my website at http://www, all that crap, mahatmarandy.net. That's one word, mahatmarandy.net. I am also on Facebook. That's about it. Again, thank you for your time, and I will be back next week for a new story. And, of course, feel free to tell your friends and